Hey, welcome back to the official Beast Lab. This is Gurenlian. I'm here today with Lalaina Duncan, the Director of Training and Development at Dogpound in New York City. Lala, as you go by, I want to welcome you to the
Right.
Beast Lab.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's been an honor. I'm super excited to finally get to meet you.
I know. And that's been the funny thing with this whole Beast Lab thing is as we're building it, people are going to be looking at this on the site, but they have to understand that we're doing everything before the site is going live.
Yeah.
So I've basically been reaching out to people that I'm just impressed by on social media. Some people are kind of like, who's this weirdo? And some people like yourself are like, yeah, let's do it. So it was cool. It was cool that you were excited to get on here with me.
Yeah, I will tell you a short little story about that is that a long time ago I used to work in the film industry and I worked on a music video with the actress Alyssa Milano. And everyone knows her, And she said it was a Blink 182 video, and someone asked her, they were like, Alyssa, like you're such a big star. This was before Blink 182 was even really known. And they said, why would you offer to do something like this for an unknown band? And she's like, anytime someone takes a risk or an opportunity to present me with an opportunity, I always say yes, no matter how big or small. And she's like, it's gotten me where I am today because of that. And I never forgot that. So
That's such a
thank you, Alyssa
cool.
Milano.
That's such a cool way to look at it. I remember when I moved to New York City in 2006 and I became a strength coach. Actually, what's called, I believe it's Equinox now in Columbus Circle, but it was called Reebok Sports Club. Um,
Okay.
I remember when I was building my own base before I went out on my own and started Brawlic, I would get up at 4:45 every morning and I had no problem doing that. And I remember my friends like, how the hell do you get up that early every day? I go, what's cool about this particular job is that at any point living in New York City, I could meet someone that could completely redirect my life. And that was what made getting up early like easy because I was like, I have no idea who I'm going to meet today. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I look at those types of things, and if we dive into kind of like my past and my history, it's very diverse.
Yeah, it is.
I've worked in restaurants, the film industry, fashion, now fitness, and everyone's like, how did you get into this from that? And it's exactly that. It's one opportunity always leads to another, and I never know what it's going to be, where this is going to lead to. So I approach everything with a completely open mindset. So
Well, I mean, we look if we run down a couple highlights here of your past because your story is very unique, and I want to touch on it before we get into some of the training aspects of what we're going to talk about. So, you have a background in dance, gymnastics, and track, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well-rounded athlete. You were in the film industry and the fashion industry. I believe in the fashion industry for what, 15 years?
Yeah, so the fashion industry is probably the longest. I moved to Los Angeles when I was 19 from Florida, and I I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I didn't go to work in the film industry. I was working at a bar and restaurant on the west side, and I was looking for to make some extra money, and one of the bartenders there said, I have a friend who's a production coordinator in film and TV. They're always looking for production assistants. And I didn't know what a production assistant was. She's like, do you have a car? And I said, yeah. And I didn't have a car. So I had to borrow someone's car just so I could go to work. And I worked as a production assistant part time and also part time working at bars and restaurants. And then that led into full time production assistant work, which was how I met, how I came up with the Alyssa Milano story because I was a PA on that music video that she was in. So I did that for about 4 or 5 years, worked in bars and restaurants for roughly over a decade to kind of supplement, jobs here and there. And then around 25, I went back to school and to study fashion design. And from 25 on, actually 24, sorry, from 24 on, I worked in the fashion industry. So that was my longest stint.
Wow. And then you moved to Hong Kong, right? Um, You moved to Hong Kong because of your job in fashion.
Yeah, so I at the time so this was in 2015 living in LA. At the time I was married and actually I had moved to Hong Kong because my spouse at the time had accepted a job in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And I went with him, and because of him I was able to get a work visa in Hong Kong. So because of that I was able to continue working in the fashion industry. I work for a sweater manufacturer, probably one of the largest in the world. And I the differences between working in Asia in the apparel industry versus working in the US, I was working for smaller mid-sized companies where I had a lot more creative freedom. I
Mm.
got to travel a lot, meet vendors, go to factories in China, India, Thailand. So it was a little bit more creative and well-rounded. When I was working in for the sweater manufacturer in Hong Kong, it was very not creative. It was just I was just cranking out designs on the computer all day long. I think I my daily quota was anywhere from like 50 to 70 sketches on the computer. And then yeah, so I wasn't really used to that.
Yeah.
Nor was I used to working in an office building with no windows. And um kind of the MO working there was you have to, as long as your boss or your direct who you directly report to is still there, you're obligated to stay.
Ah.
And so I just happened to work for this woman who loved working until 11 o'clock at night. And so, yeah, I quickly realized I was like, this just is not for me.
I
I got,
Sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I was just going to say, I would get my work done by 6 or 7 o'clock,
Yeah.
you know,
It's
so.
interesting. I've always been of efficiency, and I've
Yeah.
never had an office job. I know I would be horrendous in that environment.
Oh, it'd be terrible.
But I've always believed in like my wife. My wife is in HR. She's in the fashion world, and
Oh, nice.
I always listen to her talk about when people come and go, and I always like think about the industry, and I think about office environment. Of course, it's different with COVID, but I always thought like when you're done your work, why are you still there? Like my thing was always the same. Like if you get your stuff done, it's like your homework. If your homework's done, you don't just sit and stare at your book at home for 3 more hours just because. So it's just interesting. So you went from that situation, and I was listening to a podcast, and you were talking about your transition from that in the fashion world, and correct me if I'm wrong. You started attending gyms in the area initially to meet people, right?
Yep.
From a social aspect. And then you
Yep.
kind of fell in love with the environment. And I'm fascinated with the morality in which you switched your profession, because I want you to touch on exactly how that happened. But one of the things you had said was, I'm here designing clothes to help women hide their insecurities. And I felt that instead, I want to help empower women to change their bodies.
Yeah, so that was something that was an aha moment, that didn't happen necessarily until I would say maybe a year into mm, training hard and consistently on my own, once I was living in Hong Kong. But going back to that, that was actually something that was happening in my mind, or something that I was noticing about the fashion industry when I was still working in the apparel industry in Los Angeles.
Mm.
So we go through fittings 2 and 3 times before something ever gets really finalized and makes it to production. So, long story short, you design something really beautiful. It goes off to the sales team. They present it to buyers, and then you have buyers from all different regions coming in. And what initially ends up happening is you have buyers come in and say, I like this, however, my girl, meaning I design women's clothing, so they would always kind of refer to like our girl, meaning their customer. Um, our girl doesn't really like her arms, so if we could just make the sleeve more like a bell shape or longer. And then it might be something, well, our girl, my girl customer doesn't like a fixed waistband. So can we add some elastic? And so when you send something off to the showroom and then you get all these notes back from the team, from the sales team, and then you have to readjust the original design to fit these customers. And I'm not saying that any of this is bad, but ultimately, what was happening was, well, and I'm sure you've also maybe heard the term sometimes like vanity sizing, which a lot of so many brands do this, where they take a size 4 in the sales room, it's really truly a size 4, but when it goes into production, it might actually be a size 6 that they're calling a size 4. And that's what we would do. We would scale the garment up, still call it a size 4, but make it a little bit bigger so that the customer would think, oh, I'm fitting into a size 4.
Mm.
So
It's like changing the
there's
scales in the locker room.
Yes. So there were a lot of different things. So um, and I just remember standing in these fittings. That was part of my job as a designer, would stand in these fittings, take notes, have to make all these changes and adjustments to the garment. And a lot of these changes were made to sell a garment to someone who ultimately wasn't happy about something in themselves.
Mm.
So, like I said, it was like, oh, maybe, I've had a baby and I want to cover this up, or it, there's a lot of things, like when
Yeah.
you study fashion history, which you have to when you go to design school. They talk about what happened to people's bodies once we got rid of things like fixed waistbands and belts, because people no longer had an idea of actually where their waist was. And so once we forgot about those things, what starts to happen? The waistline gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time. These are just, that's a whole nother subject and tangent. But I I was always too kind of people would make fun of me in the office and be like, because I would want to leave work early to go to the gym. And everyone was like, oh, you should just, why do you even work in fashion? Like, you love working out. You should just be a trainer. I had someone say that to me one time, and I kind of brushed it off at the time because they weren't really saying it in a positive
A
way.
complimentary way. Yeah.
Yeah, they were kind of using it as kind of a dig towards me. But I look back at that comment now and who it came from, and that person was actually 100% right. And
Yep.
that's what I'm doing today. So I want to thank that person.
Yeah. Turned a negative into a positive. I mean,
Absolutely.
so you started attending gyms. You initially to meet people, and your first introduction into like actual training was powerlifting and strongman. And
Yeah.
I remember you mentioning that you had met a former powerlifter who was running classes, specifically training camps for women, to teach
Yeah.
them how to be trainers. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there was this company at the time in Hong Kong called Bikini Fit, and it was owned by this guy. His name is Alex. I can't remember his last name, but he was a former powerlifter from Australia. And um, he had started this outdoor boot camp specifically for women. And in Hong Kong, there's a lot of women there who are exactly in the same position that I was in. They've come there, because their husbands had taken jobs in Hong Kong. Most of the women there had families and children, young children. So a lot of the women didn't work.
Hmm.
So there was this outdoor boot camp called Bikini Fit. And he had posted an ad one day on Instagram, and it said, looking for coaches, no experience necessary.
Perfect.
And I was sitting like reading this, and I was like, oh, that's me. Like, it said something like, no experience, after you read more, it was like, no experience necessary. We do our own training, just looking for people that are passionate. And they were looking for female coaches. And I thought, that's exactly me. Like, I can do this. No experience necessary. I don't have any. So it was great. And I applied, and he reached out to me, and he did kind of like a 2-week um, training course of his own. We met in his gym at 5 a.m. every morning. And I want to say there was probably like 10 of us, but there were other there were experienced female coaches in there, as well as a couple of other like myself who were not experienced. But everyone got along really well, and we had a passion for his mission and what he was doing. And I think out of the 10 of us, maybe 6 ended up sticking around. And we would get up at 4 a.m., all meet at some park somewhere in Hong Kong. We are assigned to different parks, and we'd unload this van that had barbells and a tire and ropes and plates and kettlebells. I mean, you name it, this van was loaded with it. And we'd set up stations, and these women would show up, and they would work hard. I mean, we had women out there like, back squatting. Some were carrying heavy kettlebells up and down stairs. Hong Kong has a very like interesting terrain with a lot of hills and mountains and things like that. So we were using the terrain. They would do sprints around the parks and things like that. And these women are like on the ground, on the sidewalk in this heat and humidity, and they were just crushing it. It was amazing. And I was really inspired by that. And the only reason that ended was because there was some sort of dispute with the name between him and his partner, and he ended up having to close that business down. And so I think I worked as a coach under him for about 3 months, while at the time I was training personally. I was a member of a different gym that was a strongman gym owned by a female in the Siam Poon neighborhood of Hong Kong. And casually one day, just talking to them, they were asking me how my job at Bikini Fit was going. I was like, I think we're going to have to close. And I finished my workout and I left. I got on the bus, went back to Kowloon, where I lived across the bay, and my phone rang. And it was the owner, Gary. There were 2 owners, Santina and Gary. And Gary called me, and he's like, hey, mate, you want a job? And I knew that the receptionist had quit. And so I thought he was calling me about this receptionist job. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, how can I help? Like, I can answer phones. And he's like, no, we want you to be a trainer here at Ursus. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah, absolutely. Like, I know Bikini Fit's probably closing. And if that happens, like, we'd really love for you to come on board. He's like, all the members love you. You're super passionate. Like, we know you're willing to learn. And yeah, when can you start? Can you start on Monday? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So yeah,
Awesome.
just everything happens for a reason, I guess.
Yeah, well, everything happens for a reason, and also nobody achieves something great without help. And I think
Yep.
even the negative people, like the comment that was made in the office, or the person that let you borrow their car at your first job, like all those people led you to this. So
Yep.
we fast forward. You move to New York City. You get started at Dogpound. For people who don't know what Dogpound is, because I've been out of the city since 2016, and I was a strength coach full time for years in the city. I'm not even privy to Dogpound until I read up on it after speaking to you. Tell me about Dogpound.
Yeah. So Dogpound, so probably I want to say it was East established at that location in New York City and Tribeca probably about 2016, 2017. So that would probably explain why you weren't that familiar with it. But so Dog Pound is, in my opinion, it's the most elite personal training studio, I think, in the world. It has a very unique concept. We operate on what is a training team concept. And this was something that was established by the owner, Kirk Myers, when he started it. I think it was because he started training people, and as he became busier in order to take on, more clients or to train the people the way that he needed to train, he needed a team. And so he would get the clients started. Once they were established, then he would bring in another trainer. They would continue on with that client's training. And I think he brought in trainers from all over. I think some were from David Barton, Equinox. And how it kind of started was he was training Hugh Jackman for the movie Wolverine, I believe. And then Hugh Jackman always brought his dog to every gym. And then they kept getting kicked out of gym after gym because of the dog. And then Hugh kind of trained with this crew. And I don't know, maybe it was like 5 or 6 guys. He had like a crew that he trained with every morning at like 5:45. They called themselves the 5:45 Club. And they kept getting kicked out of gym after gym. And finally, they all brought their money together and said, let's just start our own gym. And Kirk, you run it, bring some trainers, let's start a gym. And that's how Dog Pound was started.
That is incredible.
So that's why it's called Dog Pound, because everyone always wants to know where the name came from.
That is awesome. Hugh Jackman's dog. Incredible.
I don't know what the dog's name is, but yeah, thank you.
Poor guy started a whole gym.
I know.
So this is actually a fascinating concept. So for all intents and purposes, they come in and they have almost like GPP coach who gets them set. And then they go off and they start their next phase with a new coach. Is there a system in place for you go with one coach and you have to have different coaches, or is there someone who can be like, I'm with, Jason at 7 a.m. every Monday?
Yeah, so it's kind of a little bit of both. It kind of depends on what the client wants, right? So our clientele is very affluent, busy New York and now LA professionals, because we have a location now in Los Angeles. So I always try to explain to people the way that this works best for the client is it gives the client a little bit more flexibility of when they can train, right? So rather than being locked up with my trainer only has one time slot, we assign you based on your goals. So say you're a new client, you come in, I send you an intake form, you answer all the questions. Based off of your answers, I'll pick 5. You don't have to train with all 5, but I'm going to give you the option of our best 5 trainers for you. Okay. And it can be a lot of different reasons. Some people are like, I can only train at this time on these days, and then I can only train at this time on Thursday. And then, some people want to focus on, out of 4 days a week, I want to do 2 that are conditioning and 2 that are strength. So it kind of just depends on the client's goals. And based on their answers, we choose a team for them. And of course, I try to assign one lead trainer who's going to be the person who gets them started, kicks them off, lays out the groundwork for their programming, the foundation for their training. And then once that's laid, then that's communicated to the rest of the team. And then the client can kind of go off and be a little bit more flexible with what times they train and who they train with, because the groundwork's already laid.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we just look at it as more of like a community of trainers there to help you reach your goal. So
That is got to be such a refreshing environment for a trainer to be in. I remember, the
trainer
hustle.
and client.
Well, absolutely for a
Yeah.
client. I remember when at my first gym that I trained at, well, it was the only gym that I worked for when I was in New York City. The concept was very simple. Someone comes in, new member, you get your free month. So you start your month, you get like 2 free training sessions. They fill the par queue out. Then the membership services person gives you the par queue and says, this person wants person with an athletic background to train them. Okay. And then you do your assessments and stuff like that. And I remember, especially as a younger guy coming from Penn State as a strength trainer at Penn State. Now I'm here. I'm a younger guy in New York City, getting some sideways looks from some of the veteran trainers, considered a threat now because you're taking business. Yeah. And then if somebody else's client comes to me and says, hey, like I really like that you're training Olympic lifts. My trainer doesn't know how to do those. Now you have this awkward work environment. It's got to be really refreshing to say, look, you walk into work today and you're like, Jamie did 275 back squat last week. Like now she's progressing, I'm excited to get with her today in the rack and see how, like, that's got to be a really cool environment for people to be around rather than the, like the fighting and all that other crap.
So that was one of the things, like when I came on board, the way it was explained to me, because also I hadn't really done a lot of personal training. I had mostly done group strength classes. And then after Hong Kong, I actually went to Copenhagen where I coached CrossFit. So I kind of came from more of a group training background. So when I came into Dogpound and it was personal training, that was kind of my mindset. I thought, how am I going to get clients? Like I just moved to New York City. I don't know anyone. No one knows me. And it was very seamless. I remember walking into Dogpound. I had to spend a week of shadowing other trainers. And what they did was they paired me with other trainers with similar backgrounds as mine. So like strength and conditioning. And because they knew that those clients that those trainers were training might be interested in training with me. And so I would go in, I'd shadow, say, this one trainer, and they'd be like, hey, today we're training so and so. Hey, this is the new trainer, Lala. She just moved from Copenhagen. Like, you should train with her. Or like, everyone introduce you to all the clients. And one of the great things about Dogpound, just like with any place I've ever worked, whether it be, like in a restaurant setting where you have the customer and maybe the customer kind of looks down upon the wait staff a little bit. I'm not saying that always happens, but you know what I mean? Like in a fancy restaurant where you have a high profile clientele and then there's the wait staff, there's kind of a disparity, right? Same thing with like Dogpound. We have very high profile, like the top echelon of like New Yorkers, right? And these people were treating us like family, inviting us to their home, inviting us to their parties and into their circles. Like, I mean, this hasn't happened to me, but some trainers get invited on private jets. You know what I mean? But it was just kind of like, one of the great things Dogpound has done is they've created this community and this family. And it's not just with the people that work there, it's the clients too. The clients treat us like family. We treat them like family. When you walk in the door, you're considered family.
Yeah.
And so I think that is the number one thing that makes it stand out from any other training facility, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So.
And I think, I mean, for this episode, I think the reason I brought you on here is I really thought that there's going to be a lot of people that are interested in getting into training. And I think there's a lot of people that are going to be watching this and learning, what kind of environment do I want to be in? Do I want to be out on my own? I will tell you right now, being out on your own, especially in this world, is tough. When I was doing it in 2006 and I started pulling clients out and doing my own thing, personal training gyms were just starting to become a thing. And it would more so be like, you go to a Velocity Performance and they're starting to allow trainers to come in and charge them per head. But there wasn't really a personal training area before it became as big as it is now. Now, every person who does bench press on Instagram is a trainer. So in order to differentiate yourself, it's hard. So being able to go somewhere, now the old thing for me as I've watched the industry over the last few years is that you go to a gym, you work for the gym pays you probably a terrible amount of money, and they charge crazy amounts. And then when you get really good, you start pulling your clients out because you don't really like the work environment. Dog Pound seems to be a place that's completely opposite, where you go in there excited because you're a family, and not only are you working with people that, like you said, that consider you family. That's one of my favorite parts of being a strength coach was we learned during the recession in '08. I thought my job was over. And then I found out that people were like, I need you more than ever to keep some kind of a semblance of regularity in my life, and I value you. And they would look at you as a friend, as a family member. They would take you on their vacations with them because they needed that training to clear their heads. So when you go to Dog Pound, it sounds like everyone's a family, including all the trainers together, which means you actually have friends at work, which was not always the case for, I think, a lot of trainers when they would go and work at gyms.
Yeah, I think taking the competitiveness out of it, and not to say that we don't, have standards that we need to meet, or I wouldn't even say quotas. I've never been asked to meet a quota, ever. Um, I've been given goals,
Yeah.
and not necessarily goals with numbers of sessions or anything like that, but we're given goals, something that we have to work towards. But there's never been anything, we've taken away this competitiveness of, like, exactly what you said, like being in there and feeling like, this client is mine, and no, you can't look at that person. Like, it's actually quite the opposite. Like, I've actually gotten clients from other trainers, like they've seen me training, like what you were saying with the Olympic lifts. Like, I would have an hour break in the gym and I'd be doing some cleans or something, and I'd have a guy walk over to me and be like, "Oh wow, you're really good at that. I didn't know that you know how to do that. I'd love to train with you sometime." Or their trainer, one of my coworkers, would go, "Yeah, she knows a lot about Olympic lifting. You should train with her if you're interested in that." And then they would wave me over to come and introduce me to their client, and vice versa. I've done the same. Like, especially when you travel, or I'm no longer in New York City. I live in Wisconsin now because since the pandemic, I moved here. So I train people virtually. So the clients that wanted to stay in person, I was like, hey, this is who you should train with. These people are who you should train with. Um, it's, we're a family. If you scratch my back, I scratch yours. That's how it works. So,
It makes
but
for a much easier day, less stress
yeah,
when you get out of work for sure.
yeah. And I think that Dog Pound has done such a good job at, um, e- establishing their brand to where you get people who really want to train at Dog Pound. So there's never, I get all the new client inquiries. I can tell you that if you're a trainer and you're a good trainer, um, you're going to be booked.
Yeah.
So I always tell new trainers when they come in, they're always like I was, they're like, how am I going to get clients? How am I going to stay busy? I'm like, listen, first 2 weeks, probably going to be slow, maybe the first month. Let the client see you, stay there, train, let them get to know you. And I promise you, you will be booked.
Yeah.
Because also, if you've gone through the process and we hire you and you have that Dog Pound shirt on, that's some sort of stamp of approval. So any of our clients there are going to probably want to train with you. So just relax, it'll happen. So, and it always does. And the
Yeah.
ones that aren't good, they won't last.
It's
So,
true.
you
It's
know,
true. And I think
yeah.
When I bring on coaches for the Face Off Academy, I let them know, like, I've been vetting you for years, because we only hire guys that we have actually coached. So it's a little bit different. But when they get in the door, I say, look, there is a standard that we've created with our brand. And the standard is X, Y, and Z, as far as the nature in which you train, the nature in which you compete, the nature in which you can talk to kids and help be a mentor for them. So they know what they're getting into. For you guys, when a new coach comes in the door and they say, look, I want to come work here, and they come for an interview, what are like one, two, or three of the top things you're looking for, aside from obvious knowledge in the industry? But what are you looking for from a personality standpoint?
Well, I think the number one thing is, can you operate in a team environment? I would say that's probably number one. If you're not a team player and you can't operate in that type of environment, then it's just not going to work. It doesn't matter how much knowledge you have. I don't care if you were the strength and conditioning coach for the Anaheim Ducks or whatever, like some sports team, whatever. It doesn't matter. You could be the number one trainer at Equinox for 2 years. It doesn't matter. If you can't work in a team environment, it's just not going to work. Two, passion. I mean, you have to have a passion for what you do, and authenticity. There has to be something very authentic and unique about you in order for you to thrive in this type of environment. I always kind of said, when I first joined Dogpound, and I think someone kind of, I don't know if it was the way I said it or it came across wrong, but I mean it in a very endearing way. But I look at Dogpound as we're all kind of like misfits in the fitness industry in a way. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
hear you.
we're not, we're a little bit of this, we're a little bit of that. We've got someone who's, really good at this, but maybe not great at other things. And then everyone's got an edge to them in some sort of way. I guess that's why I say like misfits.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not everyone's got like this great social media presence, or maybe not everyone's like, super chiseled and this. I don't know. I think there's something very unique about each and every one of our trainers. And everyone together, like, it really works. It's a vibe, it's a family, it's a team. And I think that's what makes it so successful, is we don't have anyone who's like the, big dog. It Everyone's kind of just, a misfit in their own way. I mean, that's how I was like, I walked in, I was this 40-year-old woman who walked into like a room full of like 20-year-olds, and you know I felt like a misfit. That to me was like my misfit. I was like, I'm like 15 years older than everyone. I don't do ankle weights and booty bands, and I mostly train men. I was like, oh, and I'm 5'4" and like 120 pounds. I was like, who is going to train with me? Like, I felt totally out of place. And then like I said, just gave it a couple weeks and my schedule was totally booked. So, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And I think, for people that are looking to be trainers, people that have a passion for it, like you said, you can't fake that. You can't fake passion. You can't fake the ability to want to be part of a team. I feel like there's two very common trainers that are in the private sector. You have the guys or girls that will come in and they're just like, I like to work out and I really don't know what else what else I want to do in my life. And then you have the people that are super over the top alpha that want to be the guy in the gym who does 80 sessions and tell everybody about it all the time.
Yeah.
So finding the kind of person that's like, look, I want to have a good living, but I also really want to get excited for what I do every day. And I want to meet new people and I want to be part of a team. Having the ability to create a brand that is completely centered around that and being successful is that's a big pat on the back for what you guys have accomplished. Now that I've read up on it, I'm like, well, now next time I go in the city, I've got to stop by Dogpound. Like, I got to see what it's about. So it's just a really impressive thing that you and your team have done over there.
Yeah, thank you. I think it is really truly special. I think sometimes, when I talk to other trainers and other coaches when I'm out at, training camps or certifications and stuff, and I tell them kind of like what we do as far as like the training team. I usually get from other trainers and coaches, I kind of get the, "Ugh, well, you guys don't care about the client then if you don't have like a strategic program for them and only one trainer and like monitoring everything." And I was like, I guess I look at it as, well, there's not every client's the same, right? I think we're going to get a certain type of client that's drawn to us, and they're going to be drawn to us because of what they see on social media or what they've heard. And we have clients of all demographics, all backgrounds, you name it, we have those clients. So we're obviously doing something right in the sense that we can service the client based on their individual needs. And I think that just is attributed to the caliber of trainers that we have, because we have such diverse and experienced trainers. I mean, in my personal opinion, what you see of us on social media isn't a full representation of the talent that we actually have. So obviously, the sexier stuff sells and that's what people want to see. But we have people that have, lost like over 200 pounds training with us. So you're telling me that training with a team doesn't work? It works for that person. Or, we're still going with this virtual training thing, which is what I do full time, 30 plus hours a week. And I also would get that kind of like frowned upon, like, oh, well, I did that in the beginning, but then gyms reopened and now I'm back to in person. Well, that's great, but there's still a lot of people that are doing the virtual training and it works for them. So, it's to me, personal training is what's best for that individual client. And that's exactly what we do, whether it's one trainer, three trainers, doesn't matter. We do what the client needs. So,
Well, I think, this is not collegiate strength and conditioning. And I will admit, I had a lot of maturing to do. When I came out of college, I worked a year at Penn State, I moved to the private sector, and I was one of those people. I'll admit it. I was like, oh, well, you don't have a kinesiology degree, you don't have a USAW, and then I learned after being, 3 or 4 years out of college, I didn't know how to do Olympic lifts till I took my USAW cert and I studied under a couple of other trainers. I'm like, well, how am I going to say that just because I did it, that someone who, a book is a book, right? Like, I'm sitting here reading textbook after textbook, Chad Waterbury, Dan John, all of these people, and just because I happened to go to college and did it doesn't mean someone can't do the exact same thing I did if they have the passion to do it. And then I moved from the mindset of like, well, same thing you just said. I was one of those idiots. Like, the person's going to come in and you need to get them results, or else you are just wasting their time and money. And after being in the private sector long enough, I was like, no, you know what, man? Not everybody wants to be not everybody wants to be jacked. Not everybody wants to be shredded. Not everybody wants to lift 300 pounds on their back squat. Some people want to come in and feel better and have a friend for a couple of hours. And some people want to leave the gym every day knowing, like, I feel great. I'm glad I came here. And it really took me a long time to understand that. And that's when my career really took off as a trainer in the private sector. And I had to realize, like, dude, calm down. Like, you don't have a game this weekend. This isn't a team. This isn't a competition. These are just people that want to feel better. You guys are providing that service. It doesn't matter if it's one person or a team concept. If you're getting it done, you're getting it done. And your guys are successful. You just opened in LA as well. Obviously, what you do works. So I want to commend you guys on that. And I just want to thank you so much for being on here, because you've given me a ton of insight on Dog Pound. Lala, go ahead and tell people from a social media standpoint where they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm only on Instagram. It's more than I can handle. It's at it's at Lift with Lala. And yeah, I mean, it's great. I'm that type of person. I put up my training videos as they come to me. I'm not super regulated on the posting and stuff, so I post when something comes to me, and I just kind of let it, people follow me organically. And yeah, it's been great. But yeah, I try not to put too much pressure on myself for on social media, but
Well, it's good for people to know where they can find you because I'm sure after
yeah.
this, after seeing you and talk and seeing your personality, people are going to want to reach out. If you guys are in New York City, stop by the Dog Pound, see what it's all about. If you're a trainer moving to New York City and you're trying to cut your teeth and you are knowledgeable and passionate, you might want to check out this gym to see if it's something for you. I want to thank you a lot for coming on here. For you guys who are regular subscribers, take the leave behind underneath the video. Take a look at some of our other VOD videos that you've seen on the website. For the premium subscribers, stick around. We're gonna have a post game when I talk to Lala. Thanks a lot. I'll see you guys in a bit.